The Doom universe is a relentless abyss of unimaginable torment. Across Urduk, Hell, and the earthly realms, countless souls endured the most grotesque and twisted fates. While suffering in Hell itself was already deemed an unspeakable horror, it was merely the beginning. There were so many more. In this universe of demons, marauders, lakes of fire and guts, just one misstep led to a world of pain. Anything was possible, and anyone could end up as a victim in this selection of awful existences. What was the worst fate? What made one experience worse than another? And would you rank these in the same order I have? Here, we explore them in this collection of terrible fates. Doom Edition. As I have covered with other game universes, a terrible fate is a terrible fate, but what makes one worse than another? For some, isolation is the worst thing someone could experience, whereas another person could be affected more by psychological torment than physical. We all have our own fears and perception of the world around us. As this collection dives deeper, the fates will get worse. This is my interpretation and understanding of the worst possible things that would happen to someone in this chaotic universe, in order of severity. We begin with how the initial zombies came to be in Doom 3 and how that would have been for the victims. When the Union Aerospace Corporation discovered the ancient slipgate technology the Martians had once used, Dr. Malcolm Betruger led his team in Delta Labs to reinvent it. Over time, the slipgate technology was constructed and they discovered another dimension, and Betruger and his second-in-command, Ian McCormick, wanted to explore it. Betruger called out for volunteers to stress test them in return for credits. It was the perfect opportunity to explore tomorrow's technology today. However, after their participation in this test, the volunteers felt different. Yes, the teleporters had broken them down at a quantum level, teleported them and reassembled them, but their interaction with Hell changed them. The energies within merged with them like a plague and worked its way through their system. The medical staff noticed an influx of people suffering with insomnia and irrational, unpredictable behavior, and they were admitted for examination. One of these people was Jonathan Wills. On the 2nd of November 2145 at 3:37 PM, Jonathan was admitted to exam room 5 after he had complained about insomnia and nausea. He was calm and compliant and exhibited no signs of disorder. However, just 33 minutes later, at 10 minutes past 4, his behaviour had changed entirely. He had grown aggressive and lunged at Dr. Cassian with a scalpel he had stolen from a supply drawer. During this window, the hellish infection had crept through his body and driven him to rage, but Jonathan would have still been in there. This fate is so dark because it was Jonathan fighting against something he knew was taking over his actions, forcing him to react aggressively. It took away him. Dr. Cassian avoided this lunge, and Mr. Wills was subdued and sedated, still undiagnosed. Yet, when they returned 20 minutes later, they found the heavy medication had not knocked him out, and in their absence, he had carved 3 symbols into his arm and cut his own tongue into 2 halves. The attendants chose to lock him up until additional psychiatrists arrived at the facility, and over the days, more people came in with similar symptoms. They grew aggressive as more of the examination rooms filled with people who were husks of their former selves. They bit into their own flesh, attacked the staff if possible, and began to rot. Skin peeling, teeth rotting, eyes clouding over with a milky film of death. I mentioned earlier that we all have our own perception of what kind of horror or injury is the worst. For me, anything body horror or being trapped runs chills up my spine. This one hits hard because Jonathan, or the others subjected to Hell's energies, would have been conscious, trapped inside of a decaying body that was slowly taken over and transformed. forced to watch as their bodies twisted into something unrecognizable as their minds buckled under the weight of hell's infection. This was terrifying. The Night Sentinel were the leading army of their homeworld, Argent de Nur, but they met an absolutely tragic end. At the height of their war against Hell, these warriors discovered that their gods, the Maker, had betrayed them and essentially used them as fodder for a war they did not want to end. The Night Sentinel had sworn an oath to protect their world, the old gods and their people, and they were all willing to give their lives to achieve this, and upon the reveal of the betrayal of the Maker, a civil war erupted between those loyal to the Night Sentinel and those loyal to the Maker. In a desperate move, the Sentinel came up with a plan to reawaken the old gods to help them, and to destroy the Hell Factory of Necrovol, but they chose to trust the wrong people. The Argenta priests were loyal to the Maker and their schemes, but they feigned loyalty to the Night Sentinel and offered them a portal to Hell so that the warriors could take down the factory. However, when what was left of this army entered the Twisted Realm, they found they had been betrayed. Each one of these soldiers was loyal to their world and their old gods, the Wraith, and as they each landed in Hell, they found themselves surrounded by demons, scattered miles away from each other, left to be devoured. This fate obviously has a physical harm aspect to it. They would have not simply been killed, they would have been tortured and tormented. The darker aspect of this is the psychological part. Each warrior was desperate to save their world and they would have done anything to do it. As they fought for their lives in Hell, they would have known that without their presence on Argent de Nur, the Maker and Hell had full access to their world without protection. The smarter among them would have also realized that they had been tricked and betrayed by those they had trusted. Their hope crushed, future gone, and trust broken. What makes this even worse is that when they were killed, they knew what would happen to their souls, tormented to the point of madness, transformed into energy, and used to continue the war they wanted to end. I cannot make a Fate video without mentioning Daisy. Daisy the rabbit was the Doomguy's pet. When he finally made it home after Hell's invasion, he discovered her, decapitated with her head skewered on a spike. Daisy is a meme in the community, but it is important to recognize what she represented. The death of his rabbit symbolized the loss of innocence and humanity. It is why he is the way he is, a being of unrelenting rage, and he carried her foot with him on his crusade against Hell. I am personally more of an animal person than a people person, so when animals are hurt in games, I tend to be more affected by that. Throughout his journey, he even had visions of her, a constant reminder of what he had lost. What is worse than losing a pet in such a horrendous way, knowing they had been tortured like that? Dr. Olivia Pierce has always been one of my favourite Doom characters. She is arguably also one of the most tragic. She was an incredibly bright mind. When Olivia was offered a job by her former mentor, Dr. Samuel Hayden, on Mars to study ancient artifacts, she accepted. These artifacts had been procured from Hell, but she did not anticipate just how much her study of them would change her. Over her time on Mars, Olivia worked very closely with the Helix Stone and other artifacts. Unfortunately, as a result of her close proximity and exposure to whatever energies and dark powers radiated from these, her body changed and she was later diagnosed with idiopathic scoliosis. In essence, her spine had curved, leaving her in a state of constant discomfort and mild pain. In more severe cases, the curvature could also have compressed her lungs, making it difficult to breathe. Because of this, Olivia was left wheelchair-bound. Now, this is something she could have still dealt with and worked through with the correct pain medication, but when she was offered an experimental procedure to, in a way, correct it, she accepted it. The operation itself involved grafting a titanium exoskeleton onto her body to replace her damaged spinal function. To achieve this, surgeons would have had to cut through muscle, tissue, and even bone. This was an invasive procedure fraught with risks. Given that the spine is densely packed with nerves, any surgical intervention carried the potential for severe nerve pain and lasting damage. Furthermore, her body would have almost certainly reacted to the foreign material, triggering inflammation as it struggled to adapt to the unnatural presence. The combination of surgical trauma and the body's natural rejection response would have made the initial stages of recovery agonizing, both physically and mentally. The procedure was a success, but Dr. Pierce was left in immense pain. Because Olivia was so dedicated to her work, she refused to take painkillers as she believed they would cloud her mind. As she walked, she would have felt the exoskeleton force her spine into what it believed was unnatural positions and fought against it with pain. Sure, it was her choice to get the surgery and refuse pain medication, but it was the Dark Lords of Hell who used her strength and perseverance against her. In her weakened and pain-ridden state, Olivia was offered a cure for her terminal illness and power if she agreed to work with them. After several failures on her part during the invasion that she had triggered, her soul was forcibly merged with an ancient demon, the Spider Mastermind, and then put out of her misery by the Doomslayer. Olivia was a villain, but she was also a victim of circumstance. Someone who was broken down physically by her interaction with a Hell artifact and manipulated with promises only to realize she was just a pawn. I felt bad for Olivia, and just the thought of that exoskeleton surgery makes me feel awful. Whenever I look at the worst things that have happened to a human in a video game series, I will always compare them to two of the worst fates, those being turned into a stalker from the Half-Life series and Zombieification from Quake. Both are barbaric acts of genuine evil. The creation of a Revenant in Doom 2016 is absolutely a contender here. Within Lazarus Labs in the Advanced Research Complex of the UAC facility, Dr. Olivia Pierce expected her staff to partake in all rituals, sacrifices, and vivisection programs. As she had fallen under the thrall of the Dark Lords of Hell, she truly believed that this science would cleanse them. This area was also restricted to the highest security clearance. It was from here that Lazarus Labs called out for UAC military operatives to volunteer in the Revenant program. Unknown to them, Olivia wanted to create soldiers for Hell's army. When the volunteer entered the operating room, they were strapped down and the program began. While awake and fully aware of their surroundings, multiple rocket launch batteries were attached to their shoulders, and an Argent charged neurobiochip was implanted at the base of their cerebral cortex so that they could control them with thought. This would have been excruciating, but this was only the start. Dr. Pierce and her team had discovered that the plasmatic isotopes that composed a Lazarus wave of hell energy had a disturbing effect on osine proteins, the structural components responsible for giving bones their tensile strength and flexibility. In essence, these proteins determined how much stress the bones could withstand and how far they could be stretched or pulled without breaking. Blasted with Lazarus waves, the team watched as each subject's bones rapidly expanded. Their flesh tore through their bones, connective tissues ripped apart, and internal organs began to decompose. The hell energy kept them alive and awake throughout this entire ordeal. After several weeks of intense pain, the skeletal growth finally stopped and, on average, resulted in a 3-meter or 9-foot 10-inch warrior composed of mostly bone. This was the creation of a Revenant. Imagine being awake, fully conscious, strapped down as your bones begin to crack and shift. A deep, agonizing pressure builds from within, and suddenly, your skeleton wrenches itself outwards, splintering through muscle and skin with sickening pops and tears. You feel your bones stretch and twist, forcing their way through your flesh, rupturing tendons and ligaments like shredded paper. Then comes the skull. The relentless pressure as bone pushes outwards, distorting your face as the skin splits and peels away, exposing raw, glistening bone. Your jaw dislocates, your cheekbones rupture, and your own features tear apart, leaving nothing human behind. And through it all, you remain alive, conscious, forced to endure every unbearable second as your own body betrays you, twisting into a monstrous abomination. This was not just pain, this was pure, unrelenting agony. As we delve deeper into the darkest parts of this collection, we arrive at a fate rooted in hell itself. During the period when souls were sent to Necrovol, they were brought before Calibus, the sightless judge, an ancient demon who determined whether a soul was worthy of being processed into Argent energy. If not, well, they had a whole other fate, but if they were selected, they were put through the Necrovol Soul Factory. At first, the condemned were directed deeper into the Black Fortress, where they entered the Soul Spires. Here, the demons used Maker technology to accelerate the torment process. Before the Maker had aligned themselves with Hell, the transformation of a mortal soul took countless years of unending torture. The soul had to reach a breaking point, completely shattered by pain and despair before it became Hell Essence. The body then became a husk and wandered this unholy realm until it eventually transformed into a demon. Yet, the Maker technology changed everything. It made the process faster, more precise, and infinitely more brutal. The souls were systematically broken, hope stripped away, the will to live crushed until nothing remained but raw despair. When they finally reached their most vulnerable state, a device called the Avulsor tore the shattered soul from its vessel, processed it, and converted it into Hell Essence, just an ingredient to be used in the creation of Argent energy. Once their essence had been harvested, the bodies were thrown into the hellish wasteland to rot and mutate. Over time, these discarded remains twisted into demonic forms, echoes of the people they once were. The true horror lies in how systematic it all was. The mortal souls were nothing more than ingredients, carefully processed and prepared with calibrated tools to efficiently strip away their humanity, tortured and tormented not just for cruelty, but with purpose. A real-life slaughterhouse for mortal humans. Now, I mentioned what happened if a soul was deemed worthy of the Soul Factory, but what if it was not? Personally, this is so much worse than the last one. If a soul was deemed unworthy, well, it was discarded into the burning sludge of the blood swamps. From what I could find, these souls were still conscious and just left there as a part of the ecosystem, trapped in the sludge, burning for eternity. Completely aware of their surroundings, unable to move. There would never be peace, no rescue, no hope, just this. This one is pretty intense because it has so many different factors. It obviously is a physical form of torment, but I feel like the psychological aspect is slightly worse. This soul had just died, and before they could adjust to this new state of being, they were discarded like sewage into the swamp because they were deemed unworthy. It is dark. The reason I picked this fate as worse than being used as an ingredient for Argent energy is because at least the suffering eventually stopped when the soul was extracted. With this one, we do not know if it ever does, just left there for eternity, as plant life and structures are built over you. It is terrifying. On to the final and, in my opinion, the worst fate. Over the course of Doom, the Doomguy had found himself in the middle of a hell invasion and fought across the moons of Mars into the demonic realm itself. He battled turned marines, demons and titans. He went through so much, and in the back of his head, he would have thought about his wife and child. Every conflict would have been about getting back to them. And when he finally defeated the Spider Mastermind, the entity behind this assault, a doorway to Earth opened. In this moment, as the Doomguy stepped through, he believed he had won. His actions had stopped Hell from invading his planet, but when he arrived, he found that an invasion had already begun. His wife, child and rabbit had been slaughtered. Everything he had fought for had been for nothing. Nothing he had done had mattered. We will not get into what happened to their souls, as we are all sure they would have been pulled into hell and tormented for eternity. But imagine the psychological blow this would have had to him. Physical pain is one thing, but psychological is absolutely something else. The loss of hope, the loss of everything is probably the worst thing someone can lose, and to have fought for so long to return to his family only to find them dead, that is the worst fate. The Doom universe is pretty much an awful place to exist in, and this is absolutely one I would not like to live in. Even now, we only know of what we have seen. We do not know just how terrible other worlds are or other parts of hell. Each fate and how they are perceived depends on how you view psychological or physical blows. In the end, personally, the loss of innocence and hope far exceeds anything physical. Having looked at the fates in Half-Life and Portal, I will say that some of those were pretty tame in comparison to these, and just maybe in a few months, in Doom the Dark Ages, we will get to see more of what happened to the poor, unfortunate souls of this universe. What I really love about the Doom series is just how dark it gets. Sure, a lot of it is overlooked in the background of constant chaos and conflict, but there is so much torment, so much darkness in the regions we explore as the Doomslayer. There were a ton of fates I wanted to include, but I did not have space, so I may make a second video. I also attempted to balance these out with psychological and physical torment. It is a great debate on what is really worse for you out of the two. Everything is subjective. What is worse to me may be tame to you. With Doom the Dark Ages coming out soon, I am so excited to re-explore the universe and see what nuggets of lore id Software adds. We know we're going to return to the lost city of Hebeth and see what really happened there. It would also be fantastic to see if there are any references to Doom 3 and fill in more of a period between Doom 64 The Lost Levels and Doom Eternal when the Doomguy arrives on Argent D'Nur. I'm still trying to figure out when the Dark Ages will begin its story. There is so much to come and I cannot wait. That was everything I wanted to say. If you enjoyed this video, then I would love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments section below. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Queen Arby, Lewis, Oren X, Drakey Phoenix, Daniel Cal Drawings, 501st Clone Boy, Ruben Mendoza, Imperial Embers, Canifex, Jimsy, Average Soul, Azu, Jonas, Yellow Rodriguez, and Detroit. What did you think of this topic? What truly is the worst fate? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.